Can you hear me now? Okay. Better here? Okay. All right. So what I said was very important. The potatoes are delicious. So before I introduce our speakers, I'd just like to say a few words. This has been a very difficult 3 or 4 months for us, everyone, and different people are reacting different ways. And I've just been listening to some of the commentary and some of the sage advice that we're getting from others. And one of the things I wanted to say today is that we can't conquer everything or fix everything, but find your passion, work on the little things that you can do, and find your tribe. Find someone, an individual or a group that you can relate to and work with. So please, think about that. Don't go into a hole. That's one of the worst things you can do. If you're in a hole, try to start coming out soon. One other thing that I did want to mention before we started is back in 2019, Dr. Contreras of the Guilford County School Board brought together some of us from the Public Education Roundtable, Doc Kearns, who was the chair, Willie, that was the co-chair, and asked us to see if we could start registering all of the eligible public school, high school students in Guilford County. And we started that back in 2019, and we worked with a partner organization, You Can Vote, out of Durham. And it's been a very successful program. We've been very happy to do that with our members from not only the PERT team, but volunteers from you guys who had helped us go into 26 schools. Jonathan? Okay. Jonathan Premier is our go-to guy from Guilford County schools, and we introduced you while you were in line getting potatoes, so stand up. And we've always been happy to work with Jonathan and the other schools and so forth, but I just had some information that we are going to be doing this again. We only have Greensboro elections this year and a few municipalities, but we're going to go ahead and get these kids registered and get them ready to vote, because that's what our democracy is about. So, enough of that. Our presenters today are Jean Smith and Lucy Bond, co-chairs of the League of Women Voters Public Education Legislative Action Team. Jean is the co-chair of the League of Women Voters Public Education LAT and the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Education Team. She also oversees the Central Fine Arts Academy, which provides private and group music and art lessons targeting children in the southwest area of Charlotte. It is a community outreach for her church to address the very limited music and art programs for elementary school children. Jean has worked in the chemical industry in product and new business development for 28 years, and then transitioned to a chemistry teacher in the local high school for 13 years. She has one son whose family lives nearby her in Charlotte. And what did I do? There's Lucy. Okay, I thought I'd lost Lucy. Okay. Lucy is the co-chair of the League of Women Voters North Carolina Public Education LAT. She is a retired elementary school educator, is an active volunteer in the Carteret community. She has served on boards such as Domestic Violence Services, Partnership for Children, NAACP, History Museum, Retired School Personnel, Delta Kappa Gamma Teachers Society, Democratic Women, and the Carteret County League of Women Voters. Lucy also serves on the Carteret County Board of Elections. So whenever we have our Zoom meetings, we're not only talking about education, we're talking about elections when Lucy and I are on. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Lucy and Jean. And just a small housekeeping note, Jean and Lucy are going to be happy to answer your questions after the presentation. You'll find note cards on your tables and chairs to write down any of your questions. Please include your name and your email address on the card, just in case we're not able to answer your question during the meeting. Candace, if you can stand up, and Beverly will be collecting your questions, so just raise your hands when you have a question and they'll collect them. And thank you so very much for coming. And now we're going to hear a presentation on the troubling times for North Carolina education. Jean, thank you. I don't want to take yours.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting Lucy and I to come and speak. Both of us are passionate about children. We're both passionate about public. Closer? Okay. Okay. Come closer. Okay, does that work? Please put your hand up or tell me I'm not speaking clearly, because I'd like to have this to be a conversation between us. As Carolyn said, you know, I'm a retired teacher, but I will tell you, once I joined the League of Women Voters education team, I learned so much more about how public schools works. And so today what I'd like to do is share some of the information that I learned. I am not an expert on a lot of it. There's people here that probably know a lot more than me. But what we are trying to do is build community voices for public school. And so I am thrilled to be part of here. I hope what I say will, again, and I are looking for is, you know, what can we do at the state level? The North Carolina education team, how can we be supporting you as you move forward with that? So thank you for your time. Okay, could we do, can you, okay. Please again, if you can't hear, put your hand up or something like that. Okay, so what I'd like to do today is to talk about who's responsible for public education, how is it funded, what are some of the current issues that have been identified by other League of Women groups, including the Piedmont Triad Education Roundtable. And then the other question is, how does League of Women Voters show support? The first two are really just background information to consider some of these current issues. And the other thing is to know who you need to be speaking to, who do you need to approach if you have an issue in this area. Again, I think having some background information will make us be more effective. So I'd like to start first. Okay. This, I feel like, is a great summary statement, and it came from Piedmont Triad Roundtable as a good summary. And if we look at this, you know, I think that public schools unite us and do the public good. One of the key things is that it's open and free to all children. And it welcomes all children, no matter what their background, no wonder what their ability, no matter what their zip code, where they live. And also we could say no matter what their learning style. As we see, it gives students tools to succeed throughout their life, It helps prepare students for college and careers, and recognizing that they will be our future leaders. And then it brings together people from diverse communities to learn and work together. We feel like that's very critical. Okay, so we see this as North Carolina being a public education as basically an investment for our children. And I'd like you to realize that most children in the K to 12 age area attend public schools. Overall, it's 84% in North Carolina, 77% in traditional schools, 7% in charter schools. In many counties, this number may be as high as 89% or higher. Typically, we see this in some of the rural counties. The other thing I'd like to highlight is that the school systems are tied with the economic health of the county. In 51 counties, okay, the largest employer is the school system. If we look at the first and second largest employer, this expands to 85%, 85 out of the 100 counties in North Carolina. Local businesses need educated and skilled employees. The public schools go beyond the traditional subjects and include career and technical education, often working in conjunction with the community colleges and workforce development. We know that business leaders who are considering moving their corporation to North Carolina look at the public schools system before other criteria, especially criteria like the corporate income tax. Okay, and then lastly, we know that the schools act as a community hub, providing opportunities for people to come together and to be space for local events. Okay. So what I'd like to do now is to talk about who is responsible for public education in North Carolina. And as you see on this slide, okay, I have the state. They have the primary responsibility, and this is in the North Carolina Constitution for it. At the local level, it's the community commissioners, it's the school boards, and then the federal government plays a role in supporting special populations and some workforce development. What I'd like to do now is go into this in a little bit more detail. Okay, so if we start first with the state, okay, we're going to start with the North Carolina General Assembly, since they have the primary responsibility and authority for public education. The North Carolina senators and representatives create the school laws on what is being taught, how school is administered, how many teachers and principals there are, their salaries, and they also establish oversight boards. The General Assembly is responsible for the majority of the funding. Next on the list, you can see the North Carolina Board of Education. Again, it is there to be supporting the public education and following up with the laws and all that the General Assembly has administered. The Superintendent of Public Instruction is in charge with implementing the laws, rules, and regulations and administrating the public funds. The superintendent is also the secretary and chief administrator officer of the State Board of Education, and of course heads the Department of Public Instruction. The lieutenant governor has a role as a member of the North Carolina Board of Education and Board of Community Colleges. The governor's role starts with the budget process. in recommending a comprehensive state budget which includes education. He also appoints members of the Board of Education, chairs the Education Cabinet, and can convene Education Task Force. He can use his visibility to be promoting public education. And we also have judges that are involved. As you know, there are many legal issues related to the schools, and we can look at the Leandro funding case to see how the courts play a role. Okay, in our communities, key is, of course, the Board of Education, which is responsible for educating the students in their school districts based on the laws and regulations set by the state and federal government. They hire the teachers and staff based on state allotments, provide school lunches, bus transportation, maintain school facilities. It administers funding, but with many requirements on how the money can be spent. The school boards do not have the power to tax. The Board of County Commissioners' decision-making is involved in funding. Counties must fund the new buildings, school buildings, and maintain the existing ones. But knowing that the state does not adequately provide funding for schools, they can provide supplements for teacher salaries or per pupil spending. But we find that these vary greatly by thousands of dollars county to county. Much of the variation is probably based on the tax base, but some of it is due to the support of public education by the county commissioners. As we look at the federal government, okay, the U.S. senators and representatives determines the laws and fundings for the the laws that impact special populations. These are students with disabilities, from low-income families, English learners. They also support technical education for high school and college students directed at workforce development. And they also provide or support the nutrition programs. Okay. I'd like to note that private schools and homeschools in North Carolina are administered by the Division of Non-Public Education, and this is under the Department of Administration. There are very few, I would say almost no requirements, and there is no oversight by the North Carolina Board of Education. Okay, I'd like to talk now about how does North Carolina measure up. Unfortunately, North Carolina lags behind most states in funding to meet the needs of students and satisfy the requirements placed on schools. It is 49th in funding effort, and this is a measure of funding based on the state wealth. It is 48th in funding level. This accounts for both state and local funds used for student per pupil allotments. If we move to teachers, it is 38th in terms of average teacher pay. That's 23% below the national average. For beginning teachers, North Carolina ranks 42nd. And please, let's remember, these are low salaries. Teachers make less than 25% less than other employees with similar degrees. Beginning teachers are now at like $42,000 per year. The average teacher pay is about $55,000. And this is in a state where when you're looking at the living income for a family, if we're talking a family of one adult and one child, that's calculated at $75,000 to be considered a living income in North Carolina. That's a big gap for our teachers. So money does matter. In states that invest more money in public education, Research shows that students have greater academic achievement and higher earnings. Yes, money does have to be spent wisely, okay? But if we're talking about student achievement, spending money on prepared and experienced teachers, on social emotional support, and high quality early education are ways to spend money wisely. When I look at these numbers, I ask, why does this level of underfunding happen in a state that has a strong economy and has population growth? So what I'd like to do now is go back and look a little bit more at school funding. Okay. So this shows funding distribution. Again, an average look at North Carolina, where in most places, if we look at the average, North Carolina, the state provides 60% of funding. Local agencies, Board of County Commissioners are going to be providing 22%, and then 17% is from the federal government. Okay, next slide, please. However, this funding varies considerably by county. And what I tried to do is present some of the counties around this area. And what I'd like you to look at is when you look at Forsyth and Guilford, they get about 54% from the state, and they provide, the local governments are providing 26, 27%. For Alamance and Randolph, it's about 65% from the state and less from the local government, 16 to 17%. And as you can see, the federal funding is fairly consistent. But what I'd like to be saying is more important than, to me, the distribution is the total amounts vary. So let's look right now. Okay, if you look at per pupil spending, you can see there's quite a variation just in the counties in this area. And if we look at teacher supplements, this is supplements to the base salary that the state supplies, it is also varying quite a bit. That means that there are certain counties where there are is much better funded, the public education, than others. This just does not seem right. So I'd like to, again, I know this is a lot of figures and stuff like that, but I'd like you to understand some of the issues that are going by. So I want to talk a little bit about government revenue. So the state gets its revenue from personal and corporate taxes, as well as some money for like special funds. These could be things like vehicle tax or some license and stuff like that, but they go into special funds. I did want to highlight the education lottery because one of the questions that I often hear about is, well, isn't the state lottery there helping with us? And what we find is that it's not as clear-cut as you might think. So the lottery has a lot of restricted impact. Okay, this past year, over $1 billion was raised in the online, the gaming aspect of it. But only about 35% eventually gets to education. And that's because, of course, they're paying the people who win, there's administration, there's marketing, all of that stuff. And even the 35%, though, has a lot of restrictions to it. 48% of the money that goes to the schools, okay, 48% go to construction. But again, there are restrictions, and a lot of that goes to what are considered Tier 1 counties. And again, in this area, Guilford, Alamance, Forsyth would not be getting that money. Randolph would be eligible for some of that money for the school construction. Okay, we also have about 38% of that going to fund non-instruction support personnel. This would include like substitute teachers. And that fund used to be provided by the general fund, and now it's is funded by the lottery. So one of the big concerns is that, number one, these funds are not associated with per pupil expenditures. And UNCC research found that 2/3 of the expenditures used to be funded by the general fund. So most of the lottery funds are used to replace, not supplement, school funding. And that's a big concern. Okay, now if we could, excuse me, if we could go back again to, okay, if we're looking at the counties, oops. Next, yeah, thank you. Okay, if we're looking at the counties, counties get the majority of their revenue from property tax. I think that's probably 66 to 75% depending on the county. They also have sales tax that comes in too. So when the county needs to address some of the community needs that the state is not funding, that's putting a lot of pressure on property tax. And so when our rates go up, some of it is because of needing to provide services that originally the state would have done. I'd like to emphasize that school boards have no ability to generate revenue. They solely rely on the General Assembly and the county commissioners for funding. Thank you. Okay, now what I'd like to do is start looking at some of the current issues that are facing the public education right now. And I will tell you, I'm coming here not with any clear answers on this. What I'm hoping is that this will start a dialogue, will help with kind of seeing that there are common themes between us, and that we can be talking about how can we, as League of Women Voter members, but also as community voices, how can we approach these issues? How can we do it in a nonpartisan, positive way that we are speaking up for public education? So what I'd first like to do is look at these concerns. I was invited last fall to speak at the Education Roundtable. And at the meeting, these were some of the concerns that were raised with it. Okay. And as you can see, you know, the de-emphasis on public education, very concerning. In this area, there was concern about the lack of teachers, that we don't have enough certified teachers in the classroom. We don't have enough of these teachers staying in teaching. We don't have enough coming through the pipeline. The other thing that was raised was the concern that a lot of the teachers are, I will tell you, afraid. They're afraid to speak up. They're afraid on how to present some of the information. And I think this censorship And this criticism that we often hear restricts a teacher's ability, okay, to both teach and talk about issues and topics. There were concerns raised for students about the lack of or the limited amount of social, emotional learning support, the need for social workers, psychologists, and other support people so that the students can achieve. And then again, what's happening when we are censoring books and limiting with that? So these were issues that were raised in Piedmont Triad. Okay, could we go to the next one, please? Oops, excuse me, I'm sorry, go back. Can you go back again? Yeah, looking at concerns across the state. Yes, thank you. Excuse me. Okay. One of the things that Lucy and I have been involved with is listening sessions. And we've had 7 different listening sessions across the state. And people have raised what are the concerns in their community. And when we look at it, there's a lot of similarities. One of the big concerns was this issue of eroding support. And a lot of it was the feeling that the public is lacking understanding about public schools. They just are not aware, and being not aware are subject to, when they hear misinformation, to be able to distinguish, is this correct or not? There is this concern of chronic underfunding. The numbers that I showed you earlier about where North Carolina stands in against other states, that's been typical for the last several years. And so when you don't have enough funds, you don't have reliable sources of funds, that is a big concern. And we believe that this may be increasing because there's going to be more competition for limited funds. There is now ongoing efforts to reduce taxes in North Carolina. The personal income tax is being reduced. I think in 2026, I think right now for 2024 it's 4.5. Next year it's going to 4.25. The following year it's 3.99. And then the corporate tax, which is now at 2.5%, is to go down to 0 by 2030. Okay. Lower taxes always sounds nice. However, we're getting to the point where lower taxes is going to be definitely impacting the services that we need to have, whether we're talking education, and I'll also bring up whether we're talking the Board of Elections. You know, if there is not enough money to do what needs to be done, that makes it extremely, extremely difficult. So one of the things that the League is doing, the Board of Education, the public education team is working with the tax policy group for us to be looking carefully at that. And if any of you are going to be attending the convention in May, this is one of the topics that we would be liking to talk together about. We see that this is going to be a continuing concern. And we know about opportunity scholarships. I mean, here is one way that money was found for opportunity scholarships, money that was desperately needed for teacher salaries, for supporting student achievement. Okay. Okay, and then the last area that I'd like to talk about, of course, is the critical need for teachers. Again, you had that in it for Piedmont Triad. We saw that across the state as being a key concern. So now what I'd like to do is let's look at the next slide. And here I am trying to ask you on helping for us to have voices supporting public education in our community. I think it's critical for us to be looking at what can we do in our communities. You know what the issues are, okay? You can develop relationships with different people. So let's look. You know, one of them is trying to help the public to be informed and committed to public education. It's trying to inform, educate local and state elected officials. They listen to their constituents more than they would from someone from across the state. And then for us also to stay informed about education issues, to distinguish things that can be misinformation. So again, trying to emphasize community voices, which I feel like is so critical. One of the things I'm asking is that you would help share accurate information with friends, families, and community. A lot of this can be through social media. Another thing that I'd like to ask is to look at an important audience. Okay, I look at myself, over 65, and one of the things that I was reading that the Pew Research Group did a study of, you know, what are things that have a positive impact on our democracy. And unfortunately, the group that was 65 or older, only 43% of seniors saw K-12 education as a positive impact on our democracy. This is down. People that were 18 to 28, up to 29 to 40, they had 60% seeing this as a positive thing. So what I'd like to do is, I think many of you are in the same age group as I am, is look to ways where we can be reaching out, again, to our friends, to our communities. This age group is 20% of the North Carolina population, but it's growing. A lot of retirees are moving to North Carolina. And then the other thing is that this age group has the highest voter turnout, about 75%. And so they are an influential group. And so I ask you, you know, can we find ways that we can be reaching out to there? Another thing I'd like to say is we need to be working with allied organizations and other informal groups. As League of Women Voters, we need to be nonpartisan, we need to be research-based, but there are good organizations, both statewide and locally, that are important. But I'd also ask you, you know, to work together. Maybe it's your book club, maybe it's a group at church that you could be working. If people could choose one area that they feel like is important, share information, look at ways to influence people, then I think that this would be critically important. So again, Lucy and I represent the Public Education LAT. And so what I also am asking today is, if you are doing things, what are areas that you would like support? Are there areas that you feel like you need more research? Please contact us. We often provide sample communications. If there is someone writing letters to the editor from the Wilmington area, we might be sharing it with others, you know, from Hendersonville to across the state, just as examples, because if you start with examples, it's a lot easier to be writing a letter and getting there. And then again, providing public education issues, resources, updates we try to provide. And the last thing is, please consider joining our meetings. We have monthly meetings. They're the fourth Wednesday via Zoom at 5:30. You don't have to be part of an education team within your chapter. Just join us. We do appreciate that. And one more slide. Okay. Again, this is a social media campaign. We ran it last year. We would like to run it now again. So if you would look in February to be sending it out. We feel like this is very important, especially as the legislature starts the long session and working on the budget. And so we really want to be emphasizing this issue of needing more teachers and what is that going to be required. So again, we'll try to be supporting you with some tools to go forward. So thank you for your time. I do appreciate it. I hope that we can continue to be working together on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Lisa. You can stay here. You're going to answer questions. So, Elma, do you want to do this, or? Elma, just come on up, just so everybody can hear you, if you don't mind. She's really good at doing this. She's really good at doing this.
Will we have an opportunity to have copies of slides? That's the first question. We want to know if they can have those slides.
Can they have the slides?
Absolutely. Yes, yes.
The slides are going to be available on the presentation that John is filming right now, so you will have those there. If you want the slides just for your personal use, not just to look at, but to have, if you will let me know and I can get copies of them, email copies of them to you.
Okay, first question. How are charter schools and vouchers affected by school funding?
Okay, of course, charter schools are public schools, and they are funded, again, by the number of students and stuff in the charter schools. The money goes through the school board for that district, and they have to transfer a certain amount of state funds and stuff to the charter schools. The vouchers are a big concern. Again, it is not necessarily clearly saying, well, we're taking away. However, any student that leaves a public school goes to a private school, certainly the school is not, the money follows that student. The problems with the public schools is that they still have to be, maintaining buildings, they still need to be dealing with that. And so money going to private schools and stuff certainly is going to be, in fact, impacting the amount of money that a traditional public school has.
And a certain level of,
Yeah.
the levels are different that are, families have different levels that they pay.
Sorry. I was a teacher, so I can speak pretty loudly, but anyway, you know, the families that need it the most, of course, get the most money, right, going toward them. But now we're finding that that amount may not cover what a private school is charging. Those schools are going up in their tuition. So really those students that the vouchers were originally meant to help and support those families, that is becoming less and less. So that's a pretty big concern.
Next question is, how many teachers do we now need in Guilford County? And what are the main obstacles for Guilford County being fully staffed?
I'm sorry, I don't have that data. I mean, that is definitely a question that needs to be addressed and would be very useful. Yeah.
Can you all answer that question?
Hi friends, I'm Leah Carper. I run Legislative Affairs for Guilford County Schools. Hi, I'm Leah Carper. So currently in Guilford County Schools, we are really good at trying to replenish the people that we've lost. And so I don't have the exact numbers, but at the beginning of the school year, we only had 30 vacancies, which is pretty great for a teaching workforce of over 6,000 educators. Yay! Now, keeping our teachers here is the huge issue because they're often being recruited by other industries, because who doesn't want somebody who can handle a large group of various stakeholders, who can communicate very, very well, and who can teach people how to do things. Like, teachers are very skilled workers. And so it's hard to keep our teachers, so we need to pay them more and we need to support them more. Okay, and one way that we can help them and pay them more is through county supplements. So our county commissioners, every teacher across the board in the state, they get base pay. They get one amount of money. Now, the way that pay differentiates based on where you live is because your county commissioner said, okay, this is how much the state is going to give you, but in our district, we're going to give you this much more. So right now in Forsyth County, they have 35% higher salary supplement than we do here in Guilford. So we've got line jumpers, you guys. They're just crossing the line over there because they get paid, like their supplement is 35% more than ours. That is why we asked for the 1/4 penny sales tax to help fix that supplement so we could pay our teachers more. So this is that's a county commissioner conversation for sure. Okay, sorry.
I'm from Eastern North Carolina, from the coast, Morehead City, Carteret County. And, you know, it used to be, and our supplement has always been lower than the surrounding counties, but our big thing was teach at the beach. Well, you know what? Now people can't afford to teach at the beach. So affordable housing, workforce housing has become a real big problem in our county. So, teaching at the beach might be fun for a while, but if you have to support a family, it's becoming harder and harder, especially for those beginning teachers with that low salary.
What, if anything, are the curriculum requirements for homeschool students, and do they have access to the voucher program?
My understanding is that there is basically no requirements in terms of curriculum for homeschooled, and basically the same for private school. We may need to do a little bit more investigating on that.
Do they have access to vouchers?
Homeschools at this time does not have access to vouchers. I am concerned from some of the things that were said as the General Assembly convened this year about expanding school choice. And in other states, there has been an effort to provide money for homeschool children. And I am concerned that we are going to be seeing more pressure that way. And this is an area that I think we need to be following closely. What does expanding school choice mean? Thank you.
How informed are our North Carolina legislatures about public education And how regularly do they get this information in the decision-making process?
I think it's more limited than you think. A couple weeks ago, I met with one of the North Carolina senators who was on the education committee for a while, and she gave me 2 recommendations. She said, please, please sit down, especially with new North Carolina senators and representatives, and give them some background information, and do it now. They are not informed with it, and you want to have them having basic information prior to any of the votes coming up. The other issue, as you know, that a lot of times the legislatures don't know very far in advance on what are some of the laws that are going to be voted on. The other thing that she asked was that we also educate our Board of County Commissioners, because they play a critical role, both, as we said before, with schools construction and buildings, but now per pupil allotments, teacher supplements is getting to be more and more critical. So I would urge this chapter, set up meetings with your county commissioners, maybe one-on-one, where you can have kind of an informal conversation with it. Meet with your legislators. I know that when I go to the town halls that my representative has, I'm sometimes one of 3 people, that attend there. They don't always have the community input. And I feel like us coming with a nonpartisan, educated, asking questions and stuff is critical. So, thank you.
I just want to add to what Jean has said about engaging our local legislators as well as our state legislators. I sent out invitations to our state legislators as well as our local legislators for this meeting, explaining what it was going to be and inviting them. We had 1 that showed up. And I think this is a call to all of the chairs for the roundtables and so forth. I think every time we send out an invitation for our lunch with the league, or even some of our Zoom meetings that we have, we need to start copying in invitations to our local and state legislators and let them know what we're thinking about and what we're talking about. And, we may be surprised. We may start getting some feedback, but I think we need to put the pressure on them so they can't say, well, I didn't know, or I never got an invitation. So that's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
I just want to say, too, look at your allied organizations, and when you get league action, calls to contact your legislature, your local NAACP, retired teachers, your teacher organizations, share with those people so they know what's going on. They can also be a voice for education, because that's important. Yeah.
And I would like to share what the High Point NAACP is doing, but I'm going to keep focused on this. I want to tell you all what's coming up. But the next question. We understand that Michelle Morrow has created a lobby group to perhaps work against the public schools. How can we fight against that effort?
Don't give up.
Yeah, I heard that too. The article that I read was kind of vague about it, but I think we need to be watching her very carefully. The other thing that I think needs to be done is to follow you know, our new superintendent, Mo Green. You all probably know him much better with that. But he, in his entry plan, has talked about the need to be engaging and listening to people. So I will tell you, at the state level, we're hoping that we can set up a webinar with him, you know, so that to talk about what is his vision and how can the community be supporting that. So I think that we need to be vigilant on what's happening, but we also need to be positively acting to see what's happening from the state superintendent.
Yeah. I just want to say, attend your school board meetings. You know, when you go to the school board meetings, a lot of times you'll have a group like Michelle Morrow or the Moms for Liberty or what, yeah. Anyway, and they'll speak up about banning books and doing this and, you know, being against a certain curriculum. But, you know, you need to be there to be supportive of teachers. And we went and said there was the group that was speaking negatively about the books and the curriculum. And then we got up and spoke about some positive things and how much we appreciate our teachers. And the assistant superintendent of curriculum came behind us and she said, "I'm so glad you're here." So although they cannot always speak up and speak out, they know that there are people there who are concerned about them, and they can't be partisan, and we can't be partisan, but we can be positive for them.
What is the difference between public funding for K-12 and public funding for higher education? What is the difference between the two?
I'm afraid I will have to find out some more information with that. We've been focusing on K-12. I do know that over 50% of the state budget goes to education, but that does include, you know, K-12, that includes probably the pre-K, but at community colleges and the universities. So that would be an area we'd have to find more information.